Throughout my life, I've occasionally come in contact with teachers and professors who begin to discuss a new topic in class. However, during their lessons, I find myself already knowing or having some prior knowledge of the subject matter beforehand. Now, how is that? Well, I've actually come to realize that the subject matter that I obtain, or the prior knowledge that I obtain, is due to such media as television, video games, and movies. And today, I would like to explain to you the influential impacts that the media has on the youth. And today I'll be going into the three categories, which are the movies, video games, and television. To start off my first point, video games. Video games build character. Typically, video games like to have some sort of protagonist, some sort of good guy, some good person. And usually video game developers like to integrate certain characteristics or personality traits which children actually look up to. They get inspired and they look up to them. And as well as video games like to typically have some sort of setting and time period. And some non-fictional games, or they like to be non-fictional games, they like to integrate some sort of setting or time period, which then you could actually integrate real life events, people, and locations, which could actually teach children. Quoting COO Carl Lu, she quotes, "The building block of morality breeds courage and reduces prejudice and racism. It emerges in emotional situations which video games can stimulate." Moving on to my next topic, movies. Movies, well, they promote education. Different war and historical movies like the Schindler's List as well as the movie 300, they have many factual or based on factual evidence or factual events that happen throughout history, which gives children a more in-depth understanding of what exactly happened throughout that time. Quoting an author from Common Sense Media, "Empathy is one of the most important traits for living in an interconnected world. It's one of the character strengths and life skills essential to the overall growth and success." Quoting another associate professor of education, Scott Metzger, he says, teachers need strong subject matter knowledge about the topics portrayed so then they can frame the movie and its relationship between fact and fiction. Moving on to my next topic, television. Television, of course, promotes creativity with different programs like news, the documentaries, and just entrepreneurship shows like Shark Tank. It offers a vast amount of or a variety of information which can inspire children to be more creative. The show Shark Tank alone is essentially a show where inspiring entrepreneurs and inventors come seeking monetary loans from wealthy business investors. Quoting an educator, Ben Bray Sanyu, "I was amazed at the creativity and imagination applied to these applications. I was so appreciative that the people shared their incarnations and results with me because I shared those ideas with other teachers who then used or tweaked the new modalities in their learning environment, and more people benefited from the sharing and conversations around a simple concept." Ultimately, this is why the media is beneficial and promotes character, education, and creativity within children and the youth. And thank you.
So Antonio, some thoughts?
First, I like how you spoke. I think you spoke pretty clearly and like consistently, so it's good to follow you. Obviously, you had like a few little pauses, but like with the professionals, we all pause a little. I like how you use quotes on you talk about the video games, the movies, and TV. You use quotes to support each thing you're talking about, which is good. I like that you specifically tied. You said video game promotes character, movie promote education, TV promotes creativity. I think it's good that you tie like a specific idea to each one. And yeah, I like your pictures. It wasn't like anything crazy flashy, but it wasn't like just a bunch of text either. You know, like you had good pictures to back up what you were saying. It wasn't you backing up the presentation. It was that supporting you, which is good. And yeah.
Okay. All right, lots of things that are pretty solid here. A couple of things that could be a little bit better, and I just feel like I've got a speech that's on the brink of being a more successful presentation if there was a little bit more elaboration on a couple of points. That doesn't mean that it was a failure. I don't mean to suggest that at all. I think you did a lot of things very well. The personal experience that you used as an attention device is fine. Setting up what the general subject matter is was okay. I do think the phrasing of the proposition is clearly stated, but it does sound a little ambiguous as to what in the long run you're going to say. It was also a little odd to me that you listed the material in your preview twice and in different order each time, and then we kind of started at a different spot than I was expecting you to start, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it was inconsistent with what you'd set up, so that's confusing. I thought that you had a lot of information in the speech that you cited very well as you got to each of those points. I appreciated that you gave me a source citation on that. The first one on video games, though, is a little abstract in what it is that they're supposed to do. I mean, I understand that that's their rationalization and justification for why a video game's a good thing. I'm looking for, well, give me an example or an illustration or something that shows me that. You talk about setting or characters and the things that kids might learn from that, and I'm going, well, you know, I'm not an aficionado of video games, but aren't most of the characters in some of those games reprehensible people who, you know, just run around killing a bunch of other people, and why is this a good thing? If they're based on historical characters, or there's a setting, for instance, that has some interesting information about a time or place that might make us more empathetic for people in those situations, that would be a good illustration to support the point that that quote is making. The quote makes this claim, and I'm going, well, can you show me that this is true? Not just that this person believes that it's true, but that there's some reason to believe that it's true. I didn't really get much of a sense of that. It probably would be easy for you to think of 2 or 3 examples of games where that is in fact the kind of thing that goes on there, where characters are based on Greek legends or historical events, and as a consequence people, you know, relate better to, you know, the suffering that somebody might have gone through in I don't know, the Oregon Trail, you know, that kind of old style video. But some kind of circumstance where people, you know, they struggled with forces of nature or hostile forces, or they ran out of supplies or something like that. And that's the kind of thing that kids need to learn about, and they learned about it through the video games. Okay, then I could see what you're talking about. As it is, it just got this generic kind of quote about it, and I thought that that was a little bit problematic. You're a little bit better with the movies example, because you have one example that you point to. You mentioned Schindler's List, although you don't give any explanation about it. We just kind of assume everybody knows what they've learned from seeing Schindler's List, that we are now more empathetic to what happened to people during the Holocaust, and we can maybe identify with how horrific those kinds of experiences are, and how monsters actually did live among us, and maybe they continue to live among us, and it would reflect some of the things that the other person was saying about video games. You know, it does it in the movies. There are a lot of people who express those kinds of things about movies and can give you particular examples. On the other hand, I'm always weary of people learning history through movies. I mean, it's interesting to get a perspective and kind of a sense of time and place, but boy, do they get it wrong so many times. I mean, the kind of stuff that gets invented for movies all the time just to tell a story. They want to tell a story, and the movie is designed to keep people entertained. So the the real story may not always work the best way for telling a visual story in a movie, and there are just plenty of examples of that. You know, if you've got a piece of fiction, that's one thing, but whenever somebody says it's based on a true event or a true story, how much of it is based on a true event or a true story? You know, I'm sure 1,000 things will come to my mind later on that I immediately think, though, of the Untouchables and the whole story of how Al Capone ended up in prison and, you know, fighting crime in Chicago and Elliot Ness and all that kind of stuff. And that's not the way it happened, you know. That's the way it happened on television, and then the movie made the history of the television show rather than the history of the history, and we get 3 steps removed from something like that. Do you get a sense of time and place? Yes. Do you get a sense of what people might have been like? A little bit, yes. But do you really know history as a result? And I would, you know, I pity people who think that, you know, 300 is a representation of what happened back in ancient Greece, you know, because they're imagining all these, you know, horrific creatures crawling around, and I'm going, it wasn't quite that way. I mean, I appreciate you get some idea about how the strategy worked, and you get some idea about what the overwhelming forces were, that kind of thing. So people will understand a little bit about it, but boy, is it not representative of what, you know, happened, you know, that kind of thing. So that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. That I appreciate the point that you're making. I'm not sure I'm convinced by that particular point. And the TV one I thought was maybe potentially a lot more effective, because you focus on programs that are not mere entertainment, but they are documentaries or they're reality programs, and they give people insights into different things. And I thought that illustrates your point best. And the whole thing about Shark Tank is a good illustration, is a good example of that. That's the kind of thing I think I needed more of in the first point. All right. The visuals are fine. They mostly work as transitions. They don't add a whole lot of information to the presentation. It's just kind of structuring the speech as you go along. Sometimes you're a little bit more dependent on the script than you want to be. And at the end, I got to tell you, it does sound a little bit like you're kind of making a persuasive argument as opposed to an informative presentation. But the places where you provided a lot of information, I appreciated your effort on that. Thank you.